Joining us now to react and respond, actually perfect timing, in his new book, New York Times bestseller yet again, Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Great Comeback. The Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, talks about all the president's success. This now goes, I got to believe, at the top of the list. How are you, sir? Wish you were here with us in Singapore.
Well, listen, I'm delighted. First of all, you went there and you did that historic interview right after the summit. I'm also delighted that the president had the courage to go out. You know, there's no question here he's rolling the dice, and he knows that he sought to create a momentum through personality that would carry them towards opening up. And if you may notice today, the North Koreans actually had uncensored coverage of Western media, I think for the first time in their history. That's a significant breakthrough, and only if you go back and look at the period with Gorbachev and the impact of glasnost and perestroika can you begin to appreciate what President Trump has been able to achieve, which is to literally begin to unlock the entire North Korean dictatorship, to move it towards a direction of being integrated with the rest of the world. And that is such a profound difference that it's really almost hard to believe that it's happening.
Let me ask you this, because I was last night and I see so many parallels as it relates to Reagan. Reagan, evil empire. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. His own aides didn't want him to say that when he gave that famous speech. Or Little Rocket Man and Fire and Fury by Donald Trump and Our Button's Bigger Than Yours and Ours Works. And in both cases, it starts off extraordinarily strong by a president, and a president, in the case of Trump, showing military force, off, 6 Stryker brigades off the coast of North Korea, the Korean Peninsula. In the case of Reagan, it's, filling that what he called gap of vulnerability and starting the biggest military buildup in our history to that time. And in both cases, you see, in the case of Gorbachev, now the case of Kim Jong-un, all that the president got here, leading up to this summit, to me was remarkable, and nobody had ever predicted it. I mean, I don't think anybody predicted he'd dismantle a nuclear test site, release 3 hostages, cross the DMZ, stop firing missiles over Japan, be willing to talk about the denuclearization of the entire peninsula and purging hardliners. All of that happened before the president came here to Singapore.
Well, that's right, and I think it's important to remember that just as with Gorbachev, the first step is the decision, which I think was absolutely caused by Trump's toughness, that the future of the Kim Jong-un government required trying to find some agreement with the Americans. And I think as Kim Jong-un is young enough at 34, he's looking out here and he's saying to himself, do I really want to remain totally isolated, a hermit kingdom, falling further and further behind the world, or do I want to try to find some way to take advantage of this opportunity to begin to modernize my country, recognizing that the price I have to pay is ultimately giving up my nuclear capability? And I think one of the key things that Secretary of State Pompeo is going to have to deal with is how do you create assurances that are real for a dictator that has legitimate reason to be genuinely concerned about the survival of his government, because he can't just capriciously walk off and allow his government to be destroyed by the Americans, and that's a deep fear on their side. On the other hand, he has been convinced, I think, that if he doesn't take active steps, that he will, in fact, ultimately be crushed by the weight of what Trump is doing. So this is an amazing moment. It's a moment that nobody other than Trump thought was possible. And we'll see if it works. But I'm a little more optimistic watching the North Korean response than I would have been 2 or 3 days ago. Because think about all the people they brought to Singapore. And as you know, because you're there right now, Singapore is an amazingly modern, wealthy, productive city. And that means these folks are coming out of a very terribly impoverished country, suddenly surrounded by what you can achieve with free enterprise and modernity, and sort of ask themselves, gee, wouldn't this be a lot better than what we already got?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point here. I mean, America got a lot. Look, I don't even know how to describe it anymore, and the media's reaction to all of this, or the lack of coverage. I was actually saying that if Stormy Daniels' attorney, was 30 hours away by airplane, I guarantee you every anchor in America would have flown over just to see him. And it just shows here we have the opportunity of a lifetime, which is a North Korean dictator now being willing to make the world a better place. We got to trust, we got to verify, but certainly a lot of steps were taken to get the president to come here. And you have people in the American media complaining, well, he took a photo op. That means Kim Jong-un won. I think us getting back our hostages and no missiles fired and nuclear missile launching test sites literally have been dismantled. I think that gives the world a win. Never mind the president. It gives everybody a win. It makes the world a safer place.
Yeah, but remember, the hardline part of the American media gets up every morning knowing this was all Donald Trump's fault. I wonder what it was. They've already thought through in their own head. This can't be a success, because if this is a success, it means that Donald Trump actually did something right. And if he did something right, their entire raison d'etre, their reason for being, is gone. And so you get this kind of truly stupid coverage. The fact is, this is an enormous gamble in the direction of peace, which you would think liberals would be giddy about. They would be thinking, oh my God, Barack Obama had done this. They would be dancing in the streets, holding celebratory meetings, etc. But the fact is, the guy who had the courage to do it wasn't Obama, it wasn't Clinton, it wasn't George W. Bush, it was Donald J. Trump. And I think every American should think this is at least a reasonable gamble to avoid war, and that's a pretty darn good thing.
I think it's a great thing. And just by the way, to update everybody, I mean, it looks like the American people are going to get another look at Kim Jong-un, as Kim Jong-un has accepted the president's invitation to visit the United States, and that's being reported by North Korean state media. I think it's further evidence
that is really important. Well, let me just remind everybody who's listening, this is really important, because part of what ultimately undermined the Soviet Empire was people from Russia coming to America. There's a famous story of the top guy who fled from the Soviets, that as he came to his job at the UN and he drove down the street in New York and he saw the vegetables and the fruit sitting out in these little stores all along the street with no guard, no line, he suddenly, as he writes in his own memoir, he suddenly realized everything he'd been told was a lie. Well, if Kim Jong-un visits, and if he brings the usual delegation size, and if they allow coverage back home, which they will, because they'll see this as a triumph, everybody in North Korea is suddenly going to realize that there's a better world out there, and there's a chance to have a better life, and maybe we ought to take it. That is an enormous opportunity.
There was a report in one of the Chinese papers, and the reports here locally in Singapore, Mr. Speaker, that Kim Jong-un and his entire delegation, that they were out partying it up all over Singapore and ordering $100 dinners per person and, $35 buffet breakfasts at the hotel that they're staying at. And one of the Chinese papers just happened to point out, which represents $35, the average monthly salary of the average person in North Korea. Not exactly them living high on the hog. You got a country where people are devastated and starving and don't have bare necessities. And, here we're not that far away, and you have a modern city here in Singapore that is incredibly vibrant and beautiful. And that could be them. Why wouldn't they want that?
Right. And I think that this little video, which people have been laughing about, was actually psychologically important, because it says it was an effort to say to them, this could be you. You could live this well. You could have this kind of future. I think this is truly a historic moment, and I think that the president deserves a lot of credit for courage. Now, I also want to remind people, this is a president who doesn't get briefed, but who talks to principles. So he talks to the leader of Japan, the leader of South Korea, the leader of China. And the result is he has real information at a level that we have very seldom seen. Reminds me, frankly, of Eisenhower, who had led the Allied forces in Europe and knew everybody by first name. And I think you're going to find that the president is going to keep his finger on this. I hope that he does, in fact, have Kim Jong-un come visit in Washington, and I hope that he decides to go to Pyongyang and to actually visit the people of North Korea, because I think the intersection of trying to reach out to each other is so important.
Let me ask you this. If this was Barack Obama, would there not be a universal call for the Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, they already got it once, so maybe you would get the Nobel Peace Prize with gilded lilies or something, because remember, they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize within a few months of becoming president in hopes that he would do something, and it's one of the more funny failures. I did know a number of...
Well, wasn't that during the apology tour, going around the world telling how bad America was and apologizing?
They loved it. Everybody in the left loved it because he was...
Newt Gingrich is with us as we continue from Singapore. All right, as we continue, Newt Gingrich is with us. His brand new book. You can get it everywhere. It's called Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Great Comeback. We only have about a minute left, Mr. Speaker, and the IG report is out tomorrow. I'm not sure what to expect. I'd never, 18 months later, are they going to get it right that Hillary broke the law and that they rigged the investigation?
Well, from everything I've been told, the Inspector General is a pretty straight shooter. Apparently, it's a very thick document. Like you, I am looking forward to it. And what a contrast to have Trump's triumph in Singapore and gradually the left's criminality emerging.
Well, I mean, if we do have equal justice under the law, this report will be devastating because the facts in this case are irrefutable at this point. Even James Comey acknowledged them. He just didn't want to do his job. All right, Mr. Speaker, congrats on the book, by the way. Another New York Times runaway bestseller. It's called Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Great Comeback. Hannity.com, Amazon.com, and bookstores everywhere. Mr. Speaker, thank you.